Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Full Council. Today, Thursday, the 23rd of February. The first item on our agenda are declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? No, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda are minutes of our previous meeting. Are there any concerns or issues around those minutes, please? And could I have a proposer? Councillor Mumford, and seconder, please. Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? Thank you. They're adopted. Item 3 on our agenda, Chairman's announcements. I just have one piece of information for you. Unfortunately, Councillor Mike Nellams is very unwell at the moment and in Basingstoke Hospital. He's been there for 9 days now. So our thoughts are with him. I have sent our greetings. He is available by text if he'd be pleased to speak to anyone. He says he's trying to tunnel his way out, but unfortunately they're keeping him there at the moment. But thank you. Item 4 on our agenda, questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5, consider reports from committees. We just have one on governance. Councillor Marcus, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, no, second governance meeting, and I thought it went really well. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 6 is to consider motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. And item 7 are urgent items. I have none. We're just waiting the arrival of our 151 officer who has been delayed on his flight this morning, but should be here shortly. So we will move on to item 10 on our agenda first, which is the general fund account rent setting, which is in the hands of our director, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just point out a typo for the eagle-eyed of you on page 143 on the table of rents. It should say actuals for 22-23 and proposed for 23-24. The total of the rents are correct, but the title is incorrect. It's a copy from last year. So basically, the general fund account, the rent setting we bring to each year. This year, we have tried to align both the general fund increase with the social rent increase. As you know, social rents are set by government. We have a maximum increase this year of 7%. And in terms of trying to strike that balance between covering costs and affordability, we're proposing that the general fund rents should be set at 7% as an increase this year, rather than the CPI, which would have been over 10%. And that tallies with what's proposed in the following paper, which is for the social rents. That gives equality across the piece. Of course, we've got increasing costs of repair and maintenance, but with increasing costs of living and below inflation pay rises, there are issues in terms of affordability that we also need to balance out. So trying to strike that middle ground, the proposal is that we increase the general fund rents by 7% this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grottick, would you wish to say anything on this?
No, I think the report is fairly straightforward. And as the director said, we don't have a lot of manoeuvring ability in this one. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Thank you. That is passed conclusively. So we'll move on now to item 11 on our agenda, which is the social housing account rent setting. Again, in your hands, Nicola. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's almost like a repeat performance here. So for the social housing rents, actually the government said we could increase rents up to 7%. Different councils have taken different approaches, but I think in the circumstances that we have here, it would be not unreasonable to put a 7% increase on the social rents. That includes the annual garage rents as well, and that will be in accordance with government guidance. So the recommendation before you is to increase the annual rents social properties by 7%, and the annual rents of the garages at the same level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Any comments regarding that, please? Councillor Dean?
Yeah, always a shame to put rents up, but we are where we are, so happy to propose the recommendations.
Thank you. And the seconder, please, Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? It's passed. Thank you very much. So, we've got item 12, I think is also in your hands, Nicola, the Isles of Scilly IFCA participation in trawling study.
I'm going to pass that over to Tom, who's on screen.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Sorry, I didn't realise you were there, Tom. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I've been waiting in the wings. This paper is unusual in that I'm requesting support for a project which hasn't yet been fully planned and fully costed, but as you'll see in the details, it's being produced at pace. In brief, there's a unique opportunity to do research following the approval of our new bylaw. Research, I think, will have national significance, but also will help inform us locally. And the reason why this is unique is because this area of seabed, approximately 4 miles to the east of St Mary's, has not been trawled for at least a decade, possibly 15 years, which in England is very rare. So what the research intends to do is to understand how trawling impacts on that particular type of seabed, which will help inform future management, but also for research taking place nationally. So the proposal is that the project is funded through DEFRA for approximately £100,000. Because the project has yet to be fully approved by DEFRA and fully written up, at this stage, I think it's just an interim approval. But my proposal I've detailed in paragraph 9 that a fully costed work plan and detail of the activities brought to the IFCA committee in April. So because the cost is greater than £100,000, it needs to be approved and brought to full council.
Hey, Tom, thank you very much for that. Councillor Watt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank Tom for this succinct report. As he mentioned, it wasn't discussed at the last IFCA meeting because of the possibility of a grant wasn't fully known at that time, but this to me is a no-brainer. And it reminds me of a comment about training. Training is expensive, but no training is even more expensive. And the same thing applies to research. Research is expensive, but no research is even more expensive. And I fully endorse this report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sims?
I think you proposed it, did you, Steve? I'm happy to propose the recommendations, and in the absence of Andy, who would be waxing lyrical about it, yeah, I think it's a very, very positive move.
Okay, thank you.
We just make sure that before we approve the recommendations that there is something there about it coming back to full council, because it doesn't say anything in the recommendations about that. So can we just amend those recommendations to make sure that we have a mechanism to bring it back to full council to approve the final cost? Just given that we're talking about budgets and the pressure on the budgets later on, that I don't want to be adding any more pressures on that.
Thank you. Nicola?
It's 100% grant funded, so there's no cost to the council. So I'm just looking at Tom in terms of timescale, in terms of the bureaucracy of bringing it back to council, whether that will work or not, given the timescale and pace of the project. So the burden does not sit with the council. Basically, we're passing the money through the council to the contractors and researchers who'll be doing the work. I don't know if Tom wants to add any more to that.
If I may, Chairman, thank you. The paragraph 5 details that it is 100% funded. The only change, and I should have mentioned this, is that we're no longer carrying money forward from this financial year to next financial year. If DEFRA approve it, then the money will be into the next financial year, which I think doesn't make a significant difference to us, but it's important to note that for the report. So I'm happy, as suggested, that I bring back to Council a fully costed, fully detailed plan, assuming that the work will take place in late April, early May. So if that works for the Council, it certainly works for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be blocking this project. It's obviously a really good project, but I just want to make sure that we're not spending any more money than we need to.
Thank you, Russell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Nicola pointed out, the funding for IFCA and this grant fund is 100%, but in terms of oversight and monitoring, the IFCA financial position is included within the quarterly reports that we bring back, so you will get oversight through those quarterly financial performance reports that we bring. If there is a line in there, if there is an issue, it will be flagged up, so you will see, but we don't foresee that at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I have a proposer, Councillor Sims, seconder Councillor Watt. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
Report. So we go back now to item 8 on our agenda, the big item of our day, which is the Council budget for 2023 to 2024, and the Council tax setting and medium-term financial plan in the hands of our 151 officer. Thank you, Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's that time of year again, February, where we bring the Council's budget and its financial strategy, which is basically its medium-term financial plan, to Council for approval. It sets the budget for the forthcoming year, the financial year 23-24, and it also sets our strategy and indicative financial targets for 24-25 and 25-26. It is important also in this report that it sets the level of council tax and sets the actual levels of council tax that will be part of the bills issued this year, both for the council and for the police. So there's that formal process of approving the level of council tax that will be levied. The report also includes the capital strategy and the Council's Treasury Management strategy on how it manages its cash and its borrowing requirements during the year. I will run through a brief overview and then try and take you through some of the numbers. Don't want to get through it line by line. It's a very long report, but I mean, I think, obviously, as always, there's quite a lot of work put into developing the budget over a period of time, with both the operational leadership team and having various workshop meetings with members to bring people along the journey. And that culminates, as I say, today. Interestingly, 17th of February 2022 last year, we did the same report. We set ourselves a balanced position, not only for the budget for the forthcoming year, but also over the 3 years. We'd come out of COVID relatively unscathed financially, and we were looking like we were in a strong position to move ahead following that global incident. And then 7 days later, we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which basically turned the whole financial strategy upside down. We are anticipating a modest increase at that point of inflation, peaking at about 5%, before dropping back later in the year, which based a lot of our strategy around. Obviously, we all know that since then, due to both the war in Ukraine, which has created an energy crisis around the globe, not just in Italy, not just in the UK, and other various global events, such as the approach that China has taken to dealing with COVID, having a very, very stringent lockdown process, which means that the second largest economy in the world has been not performing at full level. And as we all know, it feeds an awful lot of the consumable goods that we all use on a daily basis. And when they're not producing them, it creates pressure and inflation. So we've obviously had a year where inflation, as we all know, the headline figures, double figures. And going forward, it's going to take a couple of years before inflation returns back to the level that central government and the Bank of England target, the 2% target. That obviously has put a fairly big cost pressure going forward on our cost base. We're not immune to inflation, we're not immune to higher energy costs. The pay award, for instance, was 6% on average. We only allowed 3% in the budget, and that is in the base now going forward. So we've got to deal with those cost pressures. Interest rates have gone up. There will be an impact of that on our borrowing at later dates. At the moment, we're using internal resources, and we can avoid the immediate impact of the real peak in inflation in interest rates, but that can't be avoided in its entirety over the next 2 years. And generally, it's going to be a challenging time. I always say it's going to be a challenging time, but 2020 so far seemed to be throwing up global events, which nobody could have foreseen in 2019. We have dealt with them well, I think, as a council. We're in a strong financial position, but there are challenges, and we need to be aware of those. I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer, in his autumn statement, mentioned a number of times that we are in challenging times for public finance, challenging times for personal finance, challenging times generally, and I think there are quotes about how many times he quoted that statement. It was a number. Basically, the message given out by the Chancellor was, it's difficult times. The government cannot intervene and deal with that on its own. It cannot continue putting extra money into the economy. It cannot put extra support in all the time. And so, therefore, the way to tackle this difficult time will be a mix. It will be a mix of reduction, spending cuts, reduced spending on public services over the next few years. There will be increased taxation. Businesses will be expected to contribute, albeit there will be some support to phase that in. But as you all know, things like corporation tax are going up, business rates are going up. Phased in support on business rates in the early days, but it is going to have to be the pain of the financial position will be shared around. The government cannot cushion the whole country and the whole public sector from those difficult times. Partly going forward, when we're looking at that, as obviously one of the recommendations here today, is that we will reduce spending where we can. Bear in mind that we have reduced spending significantly over the last 6 years. So the low-hanging fruit, the easier lines in the budget have already been taken. So we are looking at difficulties in reducing expenditure significantly without fairly draconian impact on frontline services. But we have reduced where we can through efficiencies and better operations. Council tax will go up in the proposal by the maximum the government allowed, so they foresee that passing some of the pressure on to the local taxpayer through higher council tax is the solution to the overall position for the country, and that is why they've increased what they refer to as the council tax cap up to 5%. We are proposing to go to 4.99. The reason of just keeping it under 5 is an academic one, just ensuring that the calculation always stays under 5%, and that there isn't just a swing in roundings at the last minute that takes it over 5%, and then in theory, as soon as you go 5.01%, you would have to do a referendum. So just to be safe, we do 4.99. In addition, in the levelling up bill that it is, and that's going through the legal process of Royal Assent at the moment. It allows councils to charge a premium on second homes and empty homes. That cannot be introduced immediately if it goes through. We, by legislation, have to give 12 months notice to the taxpayer that we are changing our discounts or premiums. So in here we are recommending that once that bill gets through Royal Assent, that we do give the 12 months notice as part of this report, and that we bring it in at the earliest opportunity, which at the moment, if the bill goes through Royal Assent as planned, it should be during March, but we all know that there is slippage in government making of legislation, so it could be delayed a year. We are hopeful it won't, but we won't be able to bring it in for 23-24. We can only bring it in for 24-25. Obviously, the idea of the premium is it's there to assist the housing difficulties, which are national. Okay, we have our own individual ones on the islands, but the idea is it brings empty homes back into use at the earliest opportunity. It challenges whether people hold on to second homes for their use that they have, or whether the premium makes people think and whether they come back onto the normal usage market. It won't solve the housing issues nationally, it won't solve the housing issues on the island, but it is one tool in a multiple of tools which will be needed to address those issues. So government are bringing it in. They've I think I've mentioned previously they're changing the rules about how you switch from council tax to business rate and things. But it's just another tool to try and address making sure an efficient and best use of all the existing properties, rather than probably more so nationally, rather than building masses of new houses on green open spaces. It's one of those tools to address the issues. Part of the settlement had a disappointing statement in it. The settlement itself, I think, just government, local financial settlement was good. It was much better than anticipated. The feeling that when the government mentioned cuts in public spending, we all thought, not just locally but nationally through all the Section 151s up and down the country, that meant that the government settlement might be very harsh. We were quite surprised when it came out that the settlement for 23-24 and the indicative tone of the settlement for 25-26 was quite upbeat. And it would seem that the approach the government are taking is they know it's difficult times. They are trying to assist where they can in the first couple of years with good settlements. I think the problem will come probably in 25-26, where the spending that the government had to implement during COVID, the cost of the cost of living crisis support that is currently ongoing due to the war in Ukraine, will all have to be paid for. And the cost of government borrowing, we all know government borrowing has increased significantly. Not only that, the cost of borrowing has increased with the increase in interest rates. So there is a bill that will have to be paid. We think it will probably, from looking at it, be deferred until 25-26. But that's one of the reasons that setting out the budget today and some of the recommendations I put in, that we need to take the opportunity to make sure we're in a strong, balanced position over the next 2 years, because I think at the moment the early thoughts around the financial community in local government is that it will be a difficult time from 25 onwards. It could be a new era of reduced government support, etc., probably akin to what we received in 2011. So if we are too reliant on reserves or one-off savings, that will put us in a very weak position. So we need to be in a strong position, and this financial balance strategy does that, I think. One part of the local government settlement which was disappointing, as I said, the numbers were quite surprisingly good, was that the Fair funding review, which we have mentioned probably in the last 3 years' reports as being a little bit of a solution to some of our challenges, that if the government look at it, could we get a better settlement that more reflects our position, and the fair funding review would seem part of that. That has been deferred until at least 25, 26, and it could be longer than that by the time they do anything. It's going to come in at the same time as they look at whether and how they deal with paying for the first half, the 2020s. So that's disappointing, but there was then subsequently a bit of good news in that they have finally recognised, or we think they finally recognised, central government, that island communities may require a different approach in terms of their funding settlement. And they have initiated a piece of work with the Isle of Wight and ourselves to look at how the funding mechanisms work now, what the impact is on the council's unique demographics, and whether there needs to be a different approach. There's no guarantee that it will give us additional money. No guarantee it will change the way they deal with it. But at least it's an acceptance that it needs to be looked at. And we're quite hopeful that when you start looking at the demographics and the numbers behind, that they will start seeing that there is a reasonable requirement to deal with such small communities that are separated from the mainland through a different mechanism. So that's just a general overview. I know I've taken on, but it sets the scene for the budget. You will also see here that obviously part of setting the budget, particularly through the projects and the capital programme, is that it is the tool to deliver the council's corporate plan. That is set out, I think it's in page 23 of the report. So there is linkage between the financial plans and the corporate plan. We don't go through all the tables. You'll see, if I take page 24, our total resources, that drives our budget. So based on the level of council tax, you'll see that will generate those sort of revenues over the next few years, and you will see significant uplifts in business rates in RSG, revenue support grant from the government. So you'll see that the budget is going up, well, the resources go up quite significantly from just under 5.7 million to 6.3. But bear in mind what I've just said, inflation is running at double figures, so our cost base will have gone up on the same basis. So if our cost base hadn't gone up, and we had a settlement at that level, we would be looking at additional resources to allocate. It's not the case. We will still be looking at tightening our belts, I'm afraid. I don't tend to go through each of the tables about business rates and council tax. They're set there as how we calculate the tax base. You see the tax base on page 25 has gone down again. We anticipate in here that the tax base will go up in 24, 25, 25, 26, and I'll just touch on why. 25, 26 is slightly easier. You will know that we've got two sites, Carl Thomas and Enna Farm, which should start by the third year producing some units, some extra houses, and obviously that increases the number of houses paying council tax. The increase in 24-25 is a piece of work that's part of the recommendations in this report, is that there are a number of reliefs that are generated through council tax. People claim, probably the largest one is the single person discount. People claim it, and because these days council tax, a lot of people pay council tax through direct debit, it just rolls over year to year. So does their allowance or any reductions in council tax. What we should do is on a regular basis is challenge some of those. It's not because people are fraudulently claiming, it's because people just assume the direct debit will be adjusted the following year for the new council tax, and they don't think that perhaps they had claimed a reduction in previous years, which was not now are not now entitled to. So we should do that on a regular basis. I think due to the our own financial crisis that we probably had about 2016 to 2018, and then falling into COVID, that has slipped a bit. So I'm proposing that we do some work and make sure that we only pay reliefs to people who are legitimately due them. We're not being harsh, we're not changing what they're allowed to have, we're just making sure that they are only claimed by the people that should have them, i.e. people should pay what they are due to pay. So going through that, I've already covered the council tax premiums on second homes. I think there is an error in here where I said there are 99 second homes in Cornwall. I think it's the Yards City. I finished the text from the Cornwall report. Apologies for that. We get a number of core grants which are set out on page 32, which are built into the total resources, which include not only the revenue support grant, but includes a whole myriad now of extra funding that we get through for social care, in particular, most of it aimed at adult social care, but some of it is total social care. And that is the government's current response, in addition to having the 2% precept as part of the 4.99% increase in council tax, of addressing the national issues on adult social care. One of the risks going forward is obviously the adult social care mechanisms have to be changed, and that could bring future cost challenges to us. But at the moment, the government are trying to keep it sort of an abeyance of grants and increases in council tax, but not addressing the underlying issue of lack of overall investment in adult social care. You'll see probably that we have a series on page 35. We've set out the budget pressures, and you will see quite significantly that inflation, the net inflation, even after increasing our fees and charges fairly significantly, 23-24 sees an uplift in inflation of £627,000. So all those extra resources in the table above are going to meet that cost of inflation. I have to admit, I didn't expect to see inflation figures at that level so quickly after having years of inflation at less than 2%. But that is the speed the world changes at the moment. You'll see there's still another nearly 350,000 of other pressures there, from the way the capital programme builds up and the additional borrowing. There is some slippage there which helps mitigate it in the early years, but it's still there building over future years. But increase in energy costs, we've had the re-tendering of the waste services. They have gone up. An element of it will be inflation, but there is an element of increased cost there, which we've got to address. Hopefully in the future we can look at alternative waste solutions, which hopefully will reduce those costs, but they're not there now. And that's an area we need to invest in, I would think, going forward. Increase in business rates does help generate some additional revenue, as I said previously. The government has revalued properties. That has generated some increase in business rates. Downside is that we pay business rates on some of our own properties, so we've seen an increase in bill in several bills around our own assets, particularly at the airport. So we need to recover that as well. So generally, even after the extra resources, we still have a gap. In 23-24, it was just under 500,000 at 486,000. At the top of page 36, you can see our approach to addressing this, and probably the first thing to point out is you'll see that the savings we've got in the first year, 259,000, don't meet the gap. That is a conscious decision to smooth the budget over the first 2 years, so that we're in a position in the third year to be living with our means. But it is seen that we can't just shake out that level of savings in the first year. Some of the mitigations can't come in until the second year. So one of the mitigations to help close the gap is the second homes council tax premium. That doesn't come into the second year. So rather than cut services year one and then reinstate them year two, the plan is to use reserves to smooth that. We built those reserves up. We've always said they were there to do this type of strategy, and then we are going to do that. So we are going to use contributions from reserves of about just over 200,000 to balance the budget in the first year. But then by the following year, we just use a small amount, 15, and by 25-26, no reliance on reserves. We're living back within our means again. That is a conscious decision to smooth the budget and not take all the hit and all the issues in year one. The savings we've rated, they're set out there. They're relatively low risk. At the moment, there's a couple of ambers where we spread the savings over 2 years because we don't think they'll all be deliverable in the first year. But there's still a theme. One of the themes in the budget is we want to make sure that those who should pay do pay. And one of the things we've got to look at, and we've said it before, is trade waste. And that's set out there, that we do need to make sure that we charge the appropriate charge, particularly as the increase in waste has gone up significantly. We do pass that on. And we do make sure that the people who should pay for trade waste do in fact pay for trade waste. And if they switch from council tax to business rates, one of the downsides is that they're not entitled to free waste collection as domestic houses are. Next section is the specific projects. You'll see that we're, as you all know, the theme is that we're dropping off a number of the more traditional smaller projects, but there are 2 or 3 very large projects going forward. This is just the revenue element of it, and those figures will only grow, I think, over the next year. So rather than having 8 or 9 smaller projects, we are in that era of big, large projects. So the revenue budget is set out on page 39 at the top. You'll see that we are, in fact, got a balanced position as long as we deliver those savings. And those savings, as I said, have been rated as mainly green, which means that they should be deliverable. Doesn't mean to say that there isn't work to be done, and some of the service managers will have to ensure that they are delivered. They're not just going to sort of just happen, but we think they are deliverable, and without major changes in service delivery or changes in service levels. The reserves are set out on the page 40. We're still in a strong position in reserves. The general fund is estimated to peak at just over 3 million, but it will drop back to 2.8, and I think it will drop further than that because I think we do need to invest some of that money. Not a massive amount, it won't drop by millions, but it will need to invest in some of that, invest to save, particularly around, as I said, waste. We don't know what those costs are and what the projects will be yet, but we will need to invest some of that. But that is what that reserve is there, to cushion the position in case of unplanned expenditure, cushion spending in a crisis, and help us invest for the future. Moving on, as part of the report, obviously we have to look at our level of reserves. There's a table set out in page 41 that says, based on a risk-based approach, this is the level of reserve that we should be holding. It says 2.2, we've got 2.8 predicted, so we're above that level. But the risk-based approach that is where we're holding it. We've got all these instances. If they happen, we need money to deal with it without impacting on, immediately impacting on critical frontline services. The capital programme is set out for you in detail. You'll see the movements from one year to the next. It includes adding in additional new resources we've got through grants. There's some archiving of projects that finished last year, and we don't want to keep carrying them forward, or else they will just grow exponentially. So we knock them off when they finished. You can see in page 44 how we map those over to trying to help deliver the council's key priorities in the corporate plan. So there is a link between our capital investment and our corporate plan. You remember, capital is one of the things, corporate plan, the bigger change agenda in the corporate plan will be led by either specific revenue projects or capital rather than the routine expenditure. So that linkage is set out there. Programme is set out on the top of page 45, relatively small print, I know, but we have included the full programme later in Appendix There is a whole section on Treasury Management Strategy, and there are some new indicators that are actually in the Treasury Management Strategy later on. I won't go through those in detail. We are within those new limits that the government have brought in, so it's not an issue for us. They're not really limits, it's just a wake-up call to say, are you borrowing, are you saving money in one hand and borrowing in the other? Do you need to offset or not? If you do, you don't necessarily have to offset, but have you got a good reason why you don't? That isn't particularly an issue here. We are using internal resources to delay borrowing, which I've said previously, which is what the government are trying to encourage. As I say, we're not anticipating taking any new borrowing out immediately, but I think by about 24, we will be close to having to do that because internal cash will have been run down to a level that we do need to convert back to long-term borrowing. Delaying it at the moment consciously because, as we know, interest rates are peaking at the moment. There's maybe one or two more increases to go in the Bank of England, which will push rates up further, but then there is a feeling during 24 that rates may just start drifting backwards slightly, so it would be poor practice to borrow at the peak. So we're going to delay any external borrowings, carry on using cash resources where we can. If we run out of cash resources, we'll look for temporary short-term borrowing from the local authority market, but I don't foresee we'll need to do that in the next 12 months. But then there may be other unplanned pressures on cash. So I'm a bit wary, as I said at the beginning, with the major global events that seem to have an impact on us, that we can think that everything is going to carry on as planned at the moment. There's a big section where I have to set out all the risks that I feel that are on this budget. I think the budget is deliverable. The savings are deliverable. But we still are having and have a number of underlying risks. You have the risks around housing provision. That is not just an impact on the housing budget, it is now impacting on service delivery, particularly for key workers. We're seeing costs go up, particularly in adult social care and trying to find staffing solutions for running the care services and having to pay a premium at the moment to get people in, and that is in part generated through the housing issue. We have I put Ofsted here and it should have been CQC. We have the issues around Park House, which we need to address. They're not significant immediately, but we do need to come up with a medium-term and a long-term plan for our care provision through a care home or whatever that provision is. The existing plans that we had on an integrated process of investment with health doesn't seem to be likely to have a successful outcome now, so we do need to move to that. That is a risk around our financial strategy going forward. We do need to address that. We have large projects. I keep going on, but large projects come with a risk. We do need to be wary of that. The vessel is far too big for us really to be involved with, but we have to take a leading role at the moment on it, but we need to be very wary. A 50 million project, if you have a 10% overspend, 5 million just cripples us. And the 10% overspend on a project of that complexity probably might be disappointing, but it's not far from being impossible. It's not scaremongering. So there are a lot of risks that are set out there, but as I say, I think we have a reasonably sound position going forward. All the council tax resolutions are included in Appendix A. It's critical that we do approve those, because without those we cannot levy the council tax bills for both us and the police. But I think I'll stop there and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Russell. Chief Executive, please.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Russell. I just wanted to say a couple of things, really, and an update particularly around the green energy tariff. The first thing, as Russell said, there was a slight typo in terms of paragraph 13.9 in the fact that it was CQC inspection, not an Ofsted inspection, obviously, in terms of Park House. In terms of the budget before you today, I just wanted to say thank you to Russell and to the strategic directors, for doing all the work they do, that we're able to put before you today what we feel is a proven deliverable budget for the Council of the Isles of Scilly that doesn't do what many other councils are doing, putting unidentified savings in years 2, 3 and 4 yet to be found. So we've worked hard to put before you something that we feel continues the prudent financial management of your authority without adversely affecting frontline service delivery. As Russell said, it's not without risks, but we're well aware of those risks, and I, as Chief Executive, feel that those risks are within the bounds of our management. In terms of the other things investors say, as Russell says, I think there will still be areas we can explore. Waste is the one that he mentioned. I think there will be others, such as, for example, all the lighting at the airport, for example, placed to LED lighting, things like that, where there are still things where we can look at reducing our revenue budget through some capital expenditure, either of our own or increasingly asking the government to help us, which of course links to, as Russell mentioned, we have been asked to engage with UK government for the first time on the exploration of a fair funding agreement for the Isle of Wight and ourselves. At their request, Robert and I are meeting the Minister on Tuesday, and there's a meeting to kick off that piece of work today with civil servants, which will run all the way through to August of this year, when the civil servants will make a recommendation to the Treasury in time for the autumn statement. They're at pains to stay as they would, of course. There are no promises here, but actually it is a really good chance for us to get our points across to UK government in a proper managed project. The last thing I just wanted to say was, and you'll see in the report at paragraph 3.4, is I had to make a decision as Chief Executive in the autumn of last year to pull us out of the green energy tariff. At that time, we were unsure what the implications of the budget would be as set by the Chancellor. Since that time, as Russell has said, our settlement has been slightly better as expected. So you'll see in the report the proposal is to put the green energy tariff back in future years and to try and bring it forward if we manage to move ahead on terms of our budget. So apologies that I had to make that decision. I did discuss it with members, but it was my decision at that particular time, and you'll see that we put that back in to the budget in order to carry on trying to meet our climate change ambitions. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Grotting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo the thanks of the Chief Executive to the 151 officer for his usual clear report. Thanks also due to his finance team and our officers and their teams who have worked hard to deliver the balanced budget that is set before us. Members do appreciate all of background work that contributes to this report and also the regular budget monitoring for reports that we receive. As the Chief Finance Officer has pointed out, much has changed since our last budget setting time, most notably the invasion of Ukraine and rising inflation and supply issues. However, as he has also explained, and the Chief Executive, we're in a very fortunate position in comparison to many local authorities. We do regret proposing to raise the council tax, but the council tax here is still one of the lowest in the country, and our support for those in difficulty is as generous as possible. Two key themes emerge as several areas of work highlighted. The first is that those who can pay should pay if this is appropriate and fair. For example, as has been mentioned, there are anomalies in our waste collection charges and the way in which they operate, and that will be investigated to make sure that it is fairer for the council and understood clearly by those who pay. It also seems right that second homeowners should contribute more to our local finances. Secondly, members will continue to work with our officers to continue our focus on service delivery, as we also support an ambitious capital project programme that hopefully will deliver many benefits to our community. Lastly, we welcome the positive progress of further work on our fair funding aspirations. It would be greatly beneficial to be able to plan ahead with the security of a fairer support grant in place, recognising our unique status of the smallest unitary authority with the widest responsibilities in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, again, thanks to all the officers for their hard work in getting this done. Just a couple of questions about, specific questions about a couple of lines in there. Table 10, on page 35, it's got capital financing budget. I think paragraph 2.4, you're talking about increased capital financing related costs related to the Heritage Centre. Are those included in are those extra costs for the council, or are they included in grant funding?
No, the increases in that table come to financing the museum capital investment. It is. We haven't added the actual figure into the capital programme yet, which is why it's a separate line and not included in the line at the top, capital financing budget. But it's an indicative figure in the future years that the 1 million in principle that the council has said is minded to commit to the project will come from borrowing, and therefore the cost of servicing that borrowing is set out in that line. The 10,000 and the 42,500 is the cost of servicing that debt as it builds. That £1 million contribution is required as part of the project. So it is funded from the council resources. It's not funded from grant.
That's not that £1 million. Okay, fine. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that, like I said, the massive increase in the cost of waste disposal in that table as well, and a couple of savings. The waste service reduced number of bins and collection frequency. Could you explain that one? We talked about not touching frontline services.
Yeah, my understanding is it's the frequency around collecting the bins in and around the islands. Again, it's not collecting bins that people put out to the premises. It's the ones in public spaces that we're looking at changing the frequency and changing our approach to emptying those bins. We're not looking at, per se, changing the delivery of frontline service. But we think there's an efficiency there of getting a better operation in there to collect those public bins.
I'm just aware that there was lots of social media talk when a couple of the bins were overflowing, and I just don't want to have, if we can avoid that, then that's great.
Nicola?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This reflects some feedback we've had from the collectors, the bin collectors, who said some of the bins at the far end of the island, for instance, are empty when they go and collect. So they're looking at the frequency of collection of those bins that don't need emptying and increasing the frequency of bins that do need emptying. So there's an efficiency saving there.
Okay. And that's it from me, please.
Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, there have been quite a few references this morning to fairer funding and the Isle of Wight, and I'm just wondering if we are or we're planning to reach out to the leadership on the Isle of Wight so that when we have these discussions with central government, we're going in a sort of coordinated approach. I recognise that the Isle of Wight and the Isles of Scilly are very different entities, but if we're the two main people in that discussion, it would seem useful to understand their issues a bit more so that we can work together perhaps.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Short answer is yes in two ways. One is that I have a meeting with the Chief Executive of the Isle of Wight next week in order to discuss that, and future meetings are being planned with the 151 officer, bizarrely from the Isle of Wight, which you believe Russell comes from Portsmouth. So yes, we are going to have that conversation. And B, it is likely that the Island Forum itself chaired by the Secretary of State, will be held on the Isle of Wight this year, where the leaders will have an opportunity to meet as well. So yes, we are going to keep in close contact with the Isle of Wight. But as you say, I think our particular issues are slightly different from the Isle of Wight, and therefore we don't want to get too much wrapped up in some of their issues, where, for example, things like inter-island boating and concessionary fares and things like that are things that we want to major on that perhaps the Isle of Wight might not. So, yes, is the short answer, but not trying to get sucked into too much in terms of a generic answer.
Thank you. Councillor Roger, please.
Yeah, I just want to come on to the airport. I mean, the airport's in here, paragraph 13.8. We're reading between the lines. The airport continues to be in a potentially precarious situation year on year. I think we spoke last year that the airport was okay, and we'd come on to it next time. The numbers for the budget, the numbers we based and used this time are more accurate, because I believe we adjusted them last year, and this year we had some more accurate figures. I think tourism numbers have recovered well since COVID-19, although the landscape of tourism accommodation changes and probably is reducing. We have more B&Bs and guest houses converting either to housing, which helps that situation, or into self-catering, which reduces bed spaces, so that will reduce visitor capacity. That's on the negative side from airport numbers. So there's that, just understanding that the numbers are more accurate, with hopefully a more consistent and reliable helicopter service now on stream. That should assist us as well. Reference capital and asset replacement. I think we've talked in the past about how we're concentrating on the ships at the moment, but if we could get asset replacement government funding for the airport, it would solve lots of our issues of the costs that we have to recharge to the operators. We're looking through the ships to keep fares where they are, or hopefully reduce them going forward. But until we can get that asset replacement sorted out at the airport, we aren't unable to do that at the airport. We're actually putting charges up at the airport, which then ultimately means increased fares. That's happening the opposite kilter as we're trying to achieve with the shipping. I just raised those points. I know there's no answers today for those, but I just wanted to raise the airport as a continuing challenge.
Chief Executive.
I think you're quite right, Councillor. I mean, my understanding, broadly speaking, is the costs that we charge cover our revenue costs and don't really build up a big capital programme of replacement. So if you think that we're charging fees to build a big pot of money for capital, I don't think that's the case. I think we continue to have to go to government to ask for capital injections from time to time, which is why we're very glad that we're meeting the Minister next week. I think it's interesting, last week, just to give you a flavour of some of our negotiating points for the government, is on the one hand, as you know, they've accepted in effect that it is a lifeline service, to the islands. In the actual Aviation Act, interestingly, the Secretary of State can direct local authorities who own airports to run them as a limited company. And our 151 officer pointed out to me that if we ran our airport as a limited company, we would start on day one and we'd shut it on day two. So I will be making that point to the Minister in terms of lifeline services. And I know in the past there has been a reluctance, and that may well still be the case, but in the future it may well be negotiations around things like public service obligations on air routes might be something that we wish to talk to members about. I know in the past they've been unpopular to even mention it, but you're right. I think anything we can do to reduce the costs to our residents and to our visitors would be good for our economy and for life on the islands.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Very wise words. Councillor Sims, please.
Well, just with respect to the airport, I think the way I look at the airport, I mean, nobody wants the airport to be running at a loss for the council. However, if we didn't run the airport at a loss for the council, we wouldn't have an airport, and the impact on council revenues would just be ridiculous. We would cease to be very, very quickly. So I think it's a social amenity aspect to it, I think we have to factor in, which that doesn't make me feel better about it. It makes me feel less guilty, if you like. I think, again, thank you for a very good report. It's just regarding council tax going up by just short of 5%. This is the first time since I've been on the council when council tax has actually gone down in real terms. So whilst I'm not particularly happy about it by 5%, and we've all got to pay it as well, so that makes me grumpy as well. I think it's actually gone down this year in real terms, which made people feel less miserable about it. And I'm just, in terms of the report, I'm quite impressed with the table on table 10. We've got a total to the inflation hit over the next 3 financial years is just over 900k, which is a considerable amount for us. Yet we have a broadly positive prognosis over those next 3 years. So I'm glad I'm not the one who has to juggle these figures. So again, well done to everybody. It's no mean feat.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Councillor Bedford, please.
Good report, thank you. It's just 3 little queries. Why is pest control income not deliverable on table 10? I don't understand that. What that means? I know it's only £5,000 in there.
Okay, so if we provide a service, we can charge for discretionary services. But looking at the last few years, that's been in there as a budget line, and that's never been achieved. So let's make the budgets real, and that's an unrealistic expectation on the service.
Okay. The other one is Old Town Cemetery ground prep, 15,000. What does that? Is that getting some new spots made available?
There is a requirement over the coming year to acquire that land and prepare it for use of the cemetery.
Okay. And the third thing is swimming pool increased energy costs. If you actually take all the days that the swimming pool isn't in use, that works out at about £100 a day of additional cost. And I wonder, I know it's a social amenity, but I wonder how that can be brought down. Don't think it can it really?
As part of the corporate estate, one of the challenges we looked at is how we bring our estate to be more low carbon. Yeah. So the question would be, do you go for a low carbon solution there? Do you look at an air source heat pump rather than oil heating? Because of the limited lifespan of the building, it's probably not worth investing, but it's one of the questions we've asked the consultants to look at, whether as an investor says that might be worth doing or not over the coming year.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions? Councillor Sims?
Just like to propose the recommendations on mass.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? Thank you. And we do have to do a recorded vote on this, so I will just go round and ask you all individually for your confirmation of 4. Thank you. Councillor Grottick?
Approved.
Councillor Bedford?
Yes.
Councillor Marcus? Councillor Sims?
Yes.
Councillor Mumford?
Yes.
Councillor Dean?
Yep.
Councillor Williams? Councillor Legg? Yep. Councillor Roger?
Yes.
Councillor Watt? Yes. And myself? Yes. Thank you. I would also like to endorse the thanks to our 151 officer and all the officers who've been working extremely hard on getting us a balanced budget, and thank you very much for your work. Thank you. So we move on now. Item 9 on our agenda, which are the fees and charges for the period 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 24. Also in your hands, Russell. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah. As part of our budget setting process and the various reports that support that in the February full council, I think you probably have already done rent setting earlier, but the fees and charges is another element where we set our fees and charges specifically for the year. The report here sets those out line by line. The overarching strategy that we put into the budget and the medium-term financial plan is that we're increasing our fees and charges as a rule, as a principle, by 7% next year. That does seem it might seem a little bit high, but you've got to remember we only set them by an increase of 3% last year. inflation has been running at over 10%, so our cost base has gone up. In total, this means that on average our fees and charges have gone up by just over 10%. Okay, some may go up by more, but by 10%, when in essence, probably over that sort of 2-year period, we were seeing cost base go up by closer to 20%. So again, similar to only passing on part of the challenge to the council tax, as mentioned earlier, it's we haven't passed on the full 10% of inflation. We haven't passed on the full impact of inflation on all the fees and charges over the 2 years. The government are proposing, in the Office of Budget Responsibility, are suggesting that it's going to be a 7% increase on average for inflation next year. So we are just matching that, but we haven't actually caught up on the 10% inflation this year. So we are not proposing to take the full impact of inflation through to the fees and charges, but part of it. There are some exceptions to that where managers have felt that fees and charges could be increased by slightly more. They have done, but 7% was the rule that we wanted to try and maintain as a minimum. Some of the statutory charges can't be increased because they're set by statute. Again, they'll be set out here. In the airport, we're proposing a 10% increase to try and recover not only the increased cost of inflation generally, but also we've had the increase in the business rates for the airport, and the numbers are going to, predicted to be, based on this year, slightly lower. So the strategy on the airport at the moment is, and we've already covered it in the budget report, is it doesn't cover all its costs, but it covers its direct costs at the airport. We're trying to keep that figure fairly static, and a 10% increase is needed to do that. So at the moment, there is a subsidy going into the airport. It's not paying all its overhead. It's not paying for any of its capital. Its capital is being financed by the council through its capital financing budget. We just want to maintain that position, not make it any worse going forward. So that's why the 10% increase is required there. Fees and charges are all set out there in detail. What the increases would be and the charges which we have to do as part of a statutory requirement to publish our fees and charges on an annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Bedford.
Just a query, really. When we're talking about fees and charges, how is it, whose responsibility is for this information to go onto the council website? So when people, and I'm thinking in particular for health and social care, is that it was the fees and charges are there for 2019, and we're now in 2023. And it seems a bit ironic that we're talking about these fees and charges, and we're not actually putting that information on the website where it should be.
Nicola?
I think it's a good point, and I think there's a number of pages on our website that need updating, so we'll raise that with our managers so we can get that a bit of focus on that this year, because I think there's some work to do on the web pages.
And the other thing with a query about the fire service, do we actually charge if you get called out to a fire? Is that, was it just, say there's a hotel on fire, is there a charge?
No, not that I'm aware.
No, that's what I was wondering, yeah.
No, we don't charge for the...
That's okay, I've just been a bit...
The statutory services we don't charge for, but there are some discretionary services that we do deliver, which the government put legislation that allows us to charge. The chief, the fire officers have looked at that and they've set those fees, some of them at 7%, and some of them higher, because there's a national guidance on what can be charged.
Thank you. Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I just wanted to add, hopefully, a recommendation I think I've circulated to everyone on this paper. As you know, this weekend we had an extraordinary situation of flying on Sunday after many days of fog. At the time of year, we have no other alternative, i.e. no boat. Also the Grime Reef are out as well. It raised various issues to the point of sort of telephone negotiations going on and with regards to the fees and charges for doing that. And all I wanted to ask is that single matter is looked at separately. I've spoken to the Chief Executive and I have a recommendation of this, which is officers are requested to bring a paper to council by the meeting of Council in April detailing the costs and operational issues caused by the extraordinary opening of the airport on a Sunday. This to allow members to consider if any variation to Sunday fees and charges is appropriate. I think it's just be good to have a piece of work on that particular incident, which may never happen again, but if it does, and we have something in sort of stone as such, I think the process of making that happen would just be easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roger. So we have a vote of this amendment to the recommendations that we add this one. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that one will be added to our recommendations. Can we please have a proposer for the recommendations now? Councillor Sims, seconded Councillor Mumford. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. So, that brings us to the end of our Part 1 report. Part 2 reports are for information only. So, on that basis, I will now close the meeting. Thank you.